So I've had my Caravan for a little over 1 year. It's a 2017 Going GoPod Plus. And throughout that year, I have stayed at 28 different campsites and I've stayed away for 138 nights. So I've definitely used it. But now, 1 year later, did I make the right choice? So this is kind of an owner's review video. So let's start by first talking about how did I end up with a GoPod, because I didn't set out to buy specifically a GoPod. I have my little van, which is a Citroen Nemo, and I had two options. I could either sell my van and get a camper van, or I could keep my van and get a Caravan. Now I love my little van. I'm her second owner. Before that she was part of a fleet, but she never got used that often. So she came to me with very low mileage, but I know everything that has been done to that van since she left the factory. And she also sails every year through her MOT, and she also gets a service every year as well. But her last MOT, no advisories, no problems whatsoever. Now, if I sold her and bought a camper van, I know that within my budget, I would have had to get a vehicle that was much older than my car, that had a lot more mileage than my car, and that possibly didn't have so much of a complete service history. And when it comes to vehicles, I think the low mileage, the full service history, knowing what's been done to it, that can go a long way. So for those reasons, I didn't go down the camper van route, I decided to go down the Caravan route. But because my van is only small, she can only tow up to a ton, which limited me quite a lot in various different options. And although she can go to a ton, I didn't want to tow up to a ton. I still wanted a micro caravan, so something that was under 800 kilograms when it was fully loaded. And on top of that, I wanted to buy second-hand. This is going to depreciate no matter what happens, and it's going to cost me to look after it. So it's a depreciating liability. So for that reason, I didn't want to buy brand new. So therefore I was left on the second-hand market on websites such as Auto Trader, eBay and Facebook Marketplace. And it just so happened that somebody about an hour away from my house was selling a GoPod with full service history and at a fair price. So that's how I ended up with a GoPod. But if it was a Freedom Caravan that came available or any other type of micro caravan, then I could have just as easily ended up with one of those. It just so happened that this was available at the right time, at the right price, and with good service history, and it was sold to me from a lovely owner who I still stay in contact with now. So now let's talk about towing, because this was a big consideration for me, especially because this is my first caravan and it was going to be my first time towing. Now what I highly recommend you do is, if you have never towed before, go on a towing course. It isn't a legal requirement, but I went on one and found it very valuable and well worth the money. Also, when you get your caravan insurance, if you have been on an accredited towing course, you do get a slight discount in your insurance as well. So definitely worthwhile doing it. Now, when it comes to towing a GoPod, I don't want to make out as though it's a complete walk in the park, because you are still putting 5 meters onto the back of your vehicle. So when I hitch this to my van, my rig is 8 meters long, which is still a fair distance. However, because it's shorter than the majority of other caravans, and because it's narrower than the majority of other caravans, it is easier than other caravans. I know some people who have quite wide caravans, and when they are towing, they have to constantly think about things either side of the vehicle, lampposts, bus stops, people stood at the side of the road even though they're on the pavement. And it's just an extra layer of things to think about when they're driving. And then obviously once you have longer caravans, going around corners, roundabouts, etc. are a lot more difficult. This is, although you are still putting that 5 meters on the back of your car, it is relatively easy to tow. And I've managed to tow this in places where people with bigger caravans wouldn't be able to go. So I managed to tow this little pod all the way around the North Coast 500, no problem whatsoever. Now, when I was doing the North Coast 500, I only really saw 1 or 2 other people with caravans. Most of the people were in small motorhomes or camper vans. And that is because the roads are single track for most of the way. There are plenty of passing places, but the passing places aren't very big sometimes, especially very long. So I could pull in with my van and get my caravan in the passing place. If I had a longer caravan, I probably would have been able to fit it all in a passing place. Some of them were quite short, and I don't see how anybody with a much longer caravan, especially some of these big twin axle monster things, I don't see how they would fit their caravan in some of these passing places. But a few people have done it. I've known a few people who've got around it, but I managed to get around the North Coast 500, around some hairpin bends, single track lanes, passing places, not a problem with this caravan. It's also built with an anti-snaking design, and I have never ever experienced any problem with snaking or instability when towing this caravan. The only problem I do have is that if I'm driving along and then all of a sudden I hit a pothole or a bit of a road surface that is very uneven, then I do find that this caravan bounces quite a lot. I'm guessing that's down to the suspension doing what it's meant to do and the fact that this caravan is quite light. But it's not a major problem, it's just something that I have to be aware of. But overall, I would say that a GoPod is easy to tow, and it's great for beginners like myself. It allows me to gain experience and to cut my teeth in towing. Okay, so now let's talk about the livability of it. So how easy is it for me to live in such a small space? I'll be honest, you get used to it and it doesn't feel small after a while. It is a little bit of a TARDIS. When you're inside, it just feels like a cozy little room. Sometimes I look at the GoPod from outside and I look at it and I go, I sometimes live in that for up to 2 months at a time. And it's kind of weird because it is really small from the outside and it is really small on the inside too, but you do get used to the space. The first time I got it, the first 2 weekends that I went away in it, I hated it because I couldn't find places to put everything. Everything was on top of each other. I was having to move stuff to get to other stuff. But then you start figuring out like a little system of where you should put things. You know what I mean? What's the best place for each object and what you need and what you don't need. In the beginning, I was bringing a lot of useless stuff just for the sake of bringing it. And you kind of develop your own little way of living inside the pod. The only thing I haven't got used to yet is this sloping roof. So within the GoPod, the only place where I can stand up tall, or stand up fully, I'm 5'7", is under the pop top when the pop top is up. Everywhere else, I've got a hunch. Now this sloping roof obviously doesn't bother you when you are sat down here in the seating area or when this is a bed and I'm laid down flat asleep. However, it does kind of bother me when I am transforming this from a seating area into a bedding area, when I'm faffing around with blankets and bedding and the duvet. Then yeah, sometimes I stand up, forget it's there and bang my head. I am getting better at it, but yeah, a year on, I do still occasionally stand up and hit my head. The only other thing that's quite annoying is that if I'm faced with really bad weather and I have to put the pop top down and I'm stuck inside the pod, then it's difficult because I cannot stand up at all. And I did mention this, I did a previous video on YouTube, I think it's titled something like "Don't buy a GoPod until you watch this video," and that details all the things that I don't like about the pod, but nothing's perfect. And when the sun is shining and I've got the pop top up and I stand in my pop top cooking or in the fridge or washing up, I don't notice it. The only thing that I do continue to struggle with is the fact that the GoPod doesn't have a bathroom. Now I don't necessarily want a bathroom for the shower and the toilet and the sink, etc., because I use the sink that I've got in the pod, I use the portable toilet that goes in the cupboard, and the showers I use on campsites. So it's not really the facilities that I miss, it's having somewhere to dry waterproofs when you've been out in the rain all day. Now, some people put awnings on the back of their GoPods. I talked about this in the previous video as well, is that there is no purpose-built awning for a GoPod, and I'm not a fan of things flapping around. So I haven't found an awning that I am happy with to put on the back of my GoPod. So for that reason, I just don't have one. So when I'm away in bad weather and it's raining, I've got nowhere to hang my waterproof or also WINSTON's wet coats. So I have created a little bit of a system in that I just kind of put some hooks up near the door, I hang them in that space, and I put a towel down on the floor. It's not ideal, but it works. It's done us so far. But yeah, that's one thing that I do miss, is having somewhere to dry the waterproofs when you've been out in the rain. Now, one last thing that I will say about space is that I share this space only with my dog, who is a working Cocker Spaniel. I think he's classed as like a medium-sized dog. Now, for me and him, it's perfect. Plenty enough space for both of us. He occupies the space underneath the table, or this space at the front here, and then when I go to bed, he shares the bed with me. It works really well. However, if I was to have another person in here with me, I think I may struggle. Firstly, you would have to take it in turns to stand up, and I don't know if there's a person on this planet that I would like enough to be confined with in such a small space. I am very much a loner, and I like my own solitude, so maybe I am just unique in that sense. I think that if you choose to go away with somebody for a prolonged period of time, if you're going for a weekend or something, I don't think that's much of an issue, but I will travel in my GoPod for up to 2 months at a time. I think I would struggle with another person in here for 2 months. I would have to really like the other person. So, I mean, I don't know. There are people who make it work. I do know of GoPod couples that travel with both of themselves, and they'll have 2 massive dogs as well, and they'll go away into Europe, and they make it work. So whatever floats your boat. But for me personally, if I was to find a travel companion, probably won't, because I like my own solitude, but if I was to ever want to go traveling with somebody, I don't think this GoPod would be suitable. But yeah, other people make it work, so it's not that it is impossible. I just think it might be a little bit impossible for me. Now let's talk about off-grid. Now the GoPod is advertised as being able to go off-grid, and yeah, it can. It can. That's not a false statement. However, I cannot go off-grid in it, and I'll tell you why. Let's talk about the heating first of all. So the heating runs off gas or electric. If you're on an electric hookup, you use the electric. If you are off-grid, if you are not using the electric, you will use your gas bottle. Now, I've never used the gas bottle for heating, but I don't think it would last a particularly long time. Especially, I've been traveling throughout the last winter, very cold nights down to -5. The heating has been on almost 24 hours every day. The gas locker only holds a small gas bottle. I think you would go through quite a few of them over the space of 2 months, for example, and the gas locker only stores 1 bottle, so that means I would have to have spare bottles either in my van, or I would have to be on campsites where I could forever keep buying and exchanging them. The other thing is the electric. So it has got a leisure battery, and it has got a solar panel on top of the pop top, but it's only a 100-watt solar panel. And the leisure battery even states on the leisure battery that it's only for minimal off-grid use, and I think it says something like example lights. So yeah, I can go off-grid and I can turn all the lights on. I cannot run my fridge on electric off-grid. Now the fridge does also run off gas, but I need to lift my fridge out of its hole and plug a separate gas canister into it, And it also says that if I run it off gas, I shouldn't be using it indoors. So therefore I need to have it outside in an awning. Now that's fine, unless you're camped coastal somewhere and they say you're not allowed to have an awning. Awning has to be taken down, in which case you can't run your fridge. So off-grid, yeah, you've got to work around that. Some of the newer GoPods have a different type of fridge. I'm not quite sure how they work in terms of the off-grid usage, but in my 2017 GoPod, yeah, there's no point with it. Now, when it comes to the electricity, I can run the USB ports and I can run the 12-volt socket. I can't run the 240-volt sockets, the 3-pin plug sockets. Now, because I work and travel, I need to be able to run my laptop, my iPad, my cameras. I've got my phone that needs charging all the time, so I use a lot of electricity. So yes, a GoPod can go off-grid, but I can't go off-grid because I need that power source to work. Now, I will do a separate video on this because I do feel that a lot of caravans get advertised as off-grid where they're not really off-grid. It is off-grid in the very basic sense, and even then only for maybe a couple of days before you run your leisure battery down. So I will do another video on this. So yeah, although this is touted as going off-grid, and when I got it I was like, oh, I can go off-grid and I don't need to get an electric pitch. I need an electric pitch. I cannot run off-grid for probably more than a day or two. So now let's talk about storage, because this is a great big tick in the box for me when I bought this caravan. And that is that this caravan, because it's so small, it fits into my yard. So at the house where I'm currently living, there's a big paved yard and it has a pair of double gates to get in. And the double gates are quite narrow, so I can only just get my van through. So I didn't think I would fit a caravan in, but this fits in. And it makes it so much more convenient because it's stored at the house. I can just pack it easy and just move stuff in and out between the two. So much more convenient having it at home. And it also saves me a small fortune in storage fees. If I was going to have to take this to a storage site, if it was a bigger caravan and I couldn't fit it in my yard, I'd be spending about £400 to £600 a year just on storage costs. So the fact that I can keep it at home is a big tick. Now, this fits into pretty much like a normal car space. So I know a lot of people do keep them at home, either on their drive or in their garageways, and some even have them in their backyard. So a great big tick in the box for GoPod. It's just so much easier, so much cheaper, and so much more convenient to store than the bigger caravans. So now let's talk about value for money. So if you came up to me and you said, do you think a GoPod represents good value for money, yes or no? I would say no. But just bear with me on this one because there's more to this answer. The reason why I say no is I was at a campsite. I was at Rosemarkie campsite, which is near Inverness in Scotland. And I was parked next to a lovely couple who started chatting to, and they invited me into their caravan. They had a small 2-berth caravan as well. Obviously not as small as this, but it was a small 2-berth caravan. And it was fantastic. It had a full-size fridge, it had a freezer, a full-size cooker, a grill, 3-burner hob, big bathroom and shower. Absolutely lovely, beautiful lighting. It was fantastic. They happened to tell me how much they paid for it. I didn't ask, they just told me. And they got it second-hand, and it was about the same age as what my GoPod is. And they had only paid £1,000 more than what I did for my caravan. So in terms of value for money, they got a lot more for their money than I did, because they had a lot more bells and whistles and features and appliances in their caravan than I did. So you can get more for your money elsewhere. However, with a GoPod, you are paying a premium for it being so small and for it being so light. So their Caravan, even if I wanted their Caravan, I couldn't have it because I could not tow it with my van. With a GoPod, yes, I don't have a freezer, yes, I don't have a bathroom, yes, I don't have a shower, but what I do have is something that has a maximum weight of 750 kilograms, that is small, that is easy to move about, that I can store at home, that is stable when towing, and that my car can comfortably tow. That is what I am paying for. So now let's get to the big question of this video, which is overall, did I make the right choice in buying a GoPod? So overall, I would say yes, because of the vehicle that I've got. So my van is a Citroen Nemo. It has a maximum towing weight of 1,000 kilograms. This is a great match for my vehicle, and it's also a great caravan for me as a new person to towing. And I have had so many adventures in this little pod in just a year. I have been all over the country. I've seen some amazing things, climbed some amazing mountains, seen some amazing waterfalls, and made loads of memories with my dog. It has been a fantastic first year of podding. But if I didn't have my van, if I had a bigger towing vehicle that had a bigger towing capacity, then I don't think a GoPod would have been the right choice for me. I think I would have been better getting another small 2-berth caravan, which are bigger than a GoPod, but not by much. But again, I do think you can get better value for money and more bells and whistles. So as an example, if you bought a GoPod brand new, you're looking at paying around £19,000 to £20,000. Now you can get a Bailey Discovery D42 for £20,000, and again that has your bathroom, your shower, you can stand up throughout the whole caravan and not bang your head. And of course there's also the Swift Base Camp 2. It is more expensive at £25,000, but again, if you look at those caravans, you do get a lot more inside of them, and I do feel they are a little bit more livable than what a GoPod is. But as I said, you are paying a premium for the small space. Those caravans are bigger, not by much, but they are bigger, they weigh more, they need a bigger towing vehicle, and they wouldn't be suitable and they wouldn't be safe as a new person towing to put it on the back of my van. So I have made the right choice for me, and I've made the right choice for my vehicle. I have a safe towing match. But if things were different, then it wouldn't have been the right decision. But there you have it. Those are my thoughts on my first year of owning a GoPod. Now, if you want to know more about this caravan, if you want a tour of the inside, if you want to know some more of the things that I don't like about the caravan, if you want to see how I got on my first winter test with it, then I've got a full playlist on my channel of all my GoPod videos. So I will link to that in the description box below. But if there's anything else you want to know, or if you have any other questions, pop it in the comments and I will get back to you, or I do try to read and respond to every single comment. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you guys on the next adventure.